Hey, it's Michelle Seger with Riding the Big Wheel, and on today's podcast, we're going to talk about 7 books that I've recently read that I thought I would share with you. Now, remember on this podcast, what we're doing is we're covering just a whole lot of different topics. These aren't just business books, but they're books that have moved me in one way or another, and it's just some things that I thought that I would share with you. So I'm really excited to share it with you, and I hope you enjoy what we have to say today.
Bringing life to a vision, sharing a story, everyone listen. Wind in her hair, rolling toward the unknown. When you're riding.
Okay, so the first book I wanted to share with you is one of my favorites, and I am telling you the truth when I tell you that this is one of the books that I keep on my nightstand. I will release an annual podcast and I'll talk about what's on my nightstand. And this is a book that has been on there for a few years now. Principles is a lifetime of wisdom and principles that Ray Dalio has for his own life and work principles. And the reason that I like it is not because your principles are supposed to be his, but because it helps prompt you as to what your principles are in your own life and with your own work. But I hope that you like that book. Okay, another one. This book has been out about 20 years. Jim Collins' Good to Great. If you haven't read it, you've heard about this book. So this book is about how good companies become great companies. And what's really interesting is he said that when he set out to write this book, the intent was to get a book that it didn't matter what was happening with, macroeconomics. It wasn't about, try these things to become more efficient, but he wanted to try to develop and work on universal principles of why good companies become great companies without regard to what's happening in the environment. So it's not just something static in time. Here it is 20 years later, and he said the book is like built to last, and I have to say that it is. I have learned some really good things that I'm applying within our own business, so any leader should read Good to Great. And one thing that's really interesting is that he says in there that good is the enemy of great. Because if you're good enough, maybe you don't want to be great. Another book that completely rocked my world, and I really mean that, it's called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. And he has written so many books, but this is the first one that I've read, and I encourage you to check out other ones. I'm going to tell you how I got this book. I was asked to speak at a conference that was for executives in senior living. Right, so senior living is defined as everything from independent senior places to live all the way to complete care, right? So assisted living facilities that you may have heard of, independent living for people over a certain age, all the way to a continuous care. So this book is about how people should be given the dignity and the ability to decide how they want to author their lives, particularly the end of life. And this resonates whether you are, 40 or 90. And he's a physician, and I absolutely loved this book. It gave me a different perspective on, what do I want? And then really thinking about, my parents are getting a little older and how they just want to author how they want to live the rest of their life. And so many times I think that we get involved in other people's lives, like our parents, and say, well, this is best for you, but is it? And shouldn't we really understand what is best for them from their own perspective and respect that? Now, this book, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, I'd love to tell you how I came up with this one because maybe you will learn something from this. So this past summer, I tend to read certain writers that are my go-to when I choose to read fiction books. And I decided I wanted to get out of that cycle. And I was in Hudson, New York, with my father. I used to own retail stores. So I started my life in consulting. I took about 12 years out to own some retail stores and distribution centers, sold that, and went back into consulting, which is where I really belong and what I love. And I was in there, and you're in retail, you could spot an owner a mile away. So we went into this independent bookstore in Hudson, New York, this little town, and I knew that bookstore owner. It was a woman. I walked over to her and I said, "Hey, here's who I like to read." And she said, "I don't read any of them." And I said, "And that's why I'm talking to you. What I would love for you to do is pick out for me your 4 favorite books." I know that's really hard. And she's like, 4? Oh my God, there's so many books. If you're a bookstore owner, I'm sure it's because you love books. And I said, "Just tell me 4 that you love." And Piranesi was one of them. A book I never would have read on my own, and absolutely fascinating. I'm not even going to get into what it's all about, but it's fantastical, but yet absolutely realistic, and I believe absolutely could happen. So surprises throughout the whole book. I couldn't put it down. It seems a little strange at the beginning, and you're like, what's going on? Just keep reading it. Anyway, you want a good fun read that's fast read. It's a beach read. It's a plane read. That's it. Give yourself a break from business, and when you want to get back into business, Straight Line. This is by Ed Monser. So, and then a PhD, Brad Spencer. Ed Monser is the father of a colleague and a friend of mine. And I was just talking to her, and she was telling me that her dad wrote this book. I said, "Your father wrote a book." "Oh, yeah, Straight Line." I'm like, "What? What is that book?" And she gave me the book, and I said, I didn't even know that he wrote this book, and I've known her for some time. And I started reading it, and I couldn't believe it. Okay, it's very strange, but it actually almost made me cry. It actually did make me cry a little bit, which is going to sound really strange when you actually read it, because it truly is a straight-up business book. But it's about why people aren't straight when they're talking in the boardroom. They're not, right? People, oh my God, it's like they feel they have to tiptoe around and talk a certain way, or they don't really tell the real deal. And I'm a very real deal kind of person, which is why I'm sure I'm an entrepreneur. And not to say that people in corporate, by the way, are not the real deal. This guy is, but I like to talk straight. And I'm even like that with my kids. And maybe some people think that's brutal, but I really think it's the way to be, and I can't think of being another way. Anyway, how to talk straight and how to do it in a way that doesn't get you kicked out of the boardroom. That's really what that book is all about. We've got another book by, again, one of my favorite authors, Ray Dalio. If I didn't tell you already, Ray Dalio, he is the founder of Bridgewater, right? So it's one of the largest hedge funds in the world. I don't know that I mentioned that. But he wrote a book this past year called The Changing World Order and Why Nations Succeed and Fail. And I find it's a fascinating read. So what he did was, Ray Dalio, I told you his position in life because he actually explains that it's allowed him the privilege, and surely it is a privilege, to get in front of really smart people all over the world and get their opinions. I just saw an interview that he did very recently. I mean, my gosh, it was amazing. It was an amazing conversation that they had. And anyway, what this book is about is he studied 500 years of history of the biggest economies that were world powers. And he talked about how he showed the different patterns. So, we think the pandemic, right, 2020 pandemic, and some of these big financial crises that we have faced, we think that they're so unique, but they're not. And what he says is, and it's true, they've happened before. They just haven't happened in our lifetime. So we think it's so unique and so different. And there's a big comfort knowing that by understanding historically things that have happened time and time again and the outcome of that, how that can help us understand a little bit about the outcome that we can expect ahead. But even greater than that, and this is the really introspective part of it, is he talks about how we can break just by having this interpretation and understanding of what's happened in the past. We can break and change some patterns to have a better outcome simply because of what's happened before. But we have to get educated about it first and really understand it and that gives us a good picture and a way of thinking about how to change an outcome in the future. So anyway, that's that book. One of my favorites that I saved for last because it changed my life, and actually the person did. Tim Gunn, Gunn's Golden Rules, and it's Life's Little Lessons for Making It Work. It's just a fun read, but really it's all about Tim Gunn, and he's a fun person. And what he writes is his one chapter in there, and I always think about this, is make it work, just make it work. And that means that life isn't perfect, things aren't perfect. Things happen all the time, but it's like work through it, make it work. And it's that whole thing around, it's not what happens when you fall down, you're going to. It's not what happens when you screw up, you're going to. It's not what happens when something completely fails. What matters is what you do after that and how you get up and change your trajectory, because you can. So that's it, guys. These are my top 7 books that I wanted to share with you today. Some are just really fun reads, like Piranesi, to get lost on the beach. By the way, make time to get on the beach. I know that it's really hard for us a lot of times. To some serious business books on good to great and principles. And anyway, I just wanted to share a few with you today, and I'd love to hear what you think about any of these books. Please look them up. Please order them. Please let me know what you thought, and we'll talk to you the next time.